It's about humility, but it's about more than that, and with one primary example that's connected with humility. But if you'll first of all start by going with me to Romans chapter 12, verses 1 through 3. Romans 12, verses 1 through 3. I beseech you, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable to God, which is your reasonable service. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. For I say, through the grace given to me, to everyone who is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. There's a lot, but I want you to see a couple things. This is Paul sharing some valuable wisdom to the Roman church. And he's saying, first of all, you see the authority there. He says, for I say, through the grace given to me. He's speaking from a position of leadership or headship, to borrow Pastor Bill Tweet's term. I say, through the grace given to me. So listen up, Paul's saying. I have a special grace and an ability to communicate something from my position that you need to hear. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think, but think soberly. A lot of people get tripped up in their life by thinking of themselves more highly than they ought to think. That's almost un-American to say that, because we have spent so much emphasis on self-esteem and telling people how wonderful they are. But actually, if people have that mindset, they can end up being pretty awful people that are entitled and cocky and really don't have a lot of reasons to be cocky and entitled. Don't think of yourself more highly than you ought to think. Doesn't mean that you are supposed to have a bad self-image. It means that you're not supposed to be arrogant, but you're supposed to be humble and know who you are and think soberly. That's what that means. But to be very conscientious. This is what I'm called to do. This is what I'm good at. These are issues that I need to work on. I'm not perfect in this, but I'm sober. I recognize where I'm at, my position in life, and I'm humble. And he says, think soberly as God has dealt to each one a measure of faith. There's some people that know more than you do that you need to listen to. My wife and I started a business, and we purchased a franchise, and as part of that, we go to training by corporate who tells us this is what you got to do. And if you do this, your business is going to be successful. If you don't do this, you're going to have problems. Well, the franchises that go on to be successful, surprise, surprise, are the ones that follow orders and do what they're told. They're the ones who don't try and, I don't need to listen to them on this. I can cut corners here. I can do that. Or what are they doing? They're thinking of themselves more highly than they ought to think, versus recognizing, thinking soberly, these people have done this before I have, and they've done it well. I need to listen to them. And so much in life, if you just be a good listener and be humble and do what you're told, you'll be successful. But if you have an ego and think, I don't need to do it that way, or I have a better idea, it can get you into trouble. So look at 1 Peter chapter 5, verses 5 through 6. It says, likewise, you younger people, it's talking to young people, submit yourselves to your elders. Yes, all of you be submissive to one another, and be clothed with humility. We're going to come back to that. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. Therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you in due time. There's a lot in those verses as well. Submission, youth, how youth should treat older people, being clothed with humility. It's interesting that humility is described in association with clothing. We're going to talk about that. For God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. So grace comes to people that are humble, but people that are proud, God resists. And humble yourselves before God, because he's the one that exalts you. That's another thing. When you have a proud culture, you're trying to exalt yourself, looking for a platform, looking for recognition. That's not how promotion comes. Let God promote you. So that's how a Christian should think. A couple years ago, I went with a friend to this financial investment seminar, and it was pretty funny because at these types of things, it was like a free afternoon. It's pretty gimmicky, and I don't highly recommend these things, but I went, it was an opportunity to learn, and there's a lot of people there that want to be something that they're not, and they put off this air. I mean, the people that come to these things are dressed ridiculous, overdressed, just short of a tuxedo. They're trying to look like they're wealthy and successful, and here this is an entry-level free afternoon seminar on how to make money with a product. So obviously the people in this room are not established millionaires, or they wouldn't be at the seminar. So anyway, it's kind of laughable. And then my friend shows up, and he went the other direction. He's dressed, and he's got tennis shoes, and he looks like clothes he could wear to bed. He's so comfortable. He's wearing athletic gear. He wasn't dressed like a slob. He was dressed like maybe like a wealthy person who doesn't care. But anyway, it was just funny because how he was dressing was conveying, I'm not like these people. And there's a lesson in that, because how you dress has a message. How you dress has an attitude. Like, Pastor Chase, I thought this was about humility. What does this have to do with how you dress? Well, the verse we just read says, be clothed with humility. So there's a connection between humility and how you dress. When we dress in a manner that's not appropriate, it conveys pride. It can convey hostility. I'm not like these people. I don't want to be like these people. How you dress can convey, I need special attention. I need recognition. For me, some people dress to get people to look at them. Saw a girl coming out of Hot Topic the other day, like, whoa, okay, I didn't know goth was still a thing. This girl was rocking the goth. So how you dress, see, that seems like a little thing, right? It is kind of a little thing, but if you are good about the little things, you're professional with the little things, you're obedient, you get promoted in your life. If you're cocky, if you're rebellious, if you fight against authority and dress codes and those types of things, that's not going to go well for you. Think about the whole debate about tattoos. Why do people need tattoos so much? If it's not a big deal, then why do you have to have one? Yes, not every person who gets a tattoo is getting one because they want to put something evil on their body. But historically and culturally, tattoos have been associated with bad things. They just have. That's just fact. And usually tattoos, they're like branding yourself. And so when we have tattoos, the question is why? Why do you have to brand yourself? What is it about that tattoo that you're attracted to? Is it a sin to have a tattoo? Well, not necessarily. It might be for somebody, in the sense that the scriptures tell us to avoid the appearance of evil, and there's definitely tattoos I think that could be described as evil. But even if you have a tattoo of a scripture verse or something, I mean, it's a debate, it's a question, and historically people get tattoos. It's actually a form of identification. It's like a brand. It's almost like the world brand. It's like the cultural brand. And we're supposed to be kingdom culture, not world culture. And so, are tattoos a big deal? Are clothes a big deal? Well, yes and no. But I think just like clothes, they convey an attitude. Is it a godly attitude or is it a worldly attitude? In military, obviously they have dress codes. And they have reasons for dress codes. And here's some excerpts from a book by Jocko. Discipline started with the little things: high and tight haircuts, a clean shave every day, and uniforms maintained. With that, the more important things fell into place: body armor and helmets worn outdoors at all times, and weapons cleaned and ready for use at a moment's notice. Discipline created vigilance and operational readiness, which translated to high performance and success in the battlefield. Listen to that. What he's saying? The discipline of how you dress. It's a little thing, but being disciplined in the little things made you ready for the big things. It said just by having these little disciplines, when the battle began, they're not scrambling to put their shirt on. They're not a mess. They're organized, they're ready, they're prepared, they're professional. So that's something that we can convey. And it's thinking soberly. And so high performance and success in the battlefield goes back to dress code. I mean, obviously that's not the only thing it goes back to, but it's connected. Another thing that he's talking about, he's talking about this SEAL team that comes into this area where they have this shared space with a bunch of Army guys and Marines. And Army guys and Marines have a strict dress code, and SEALs don't typically have a strict dress code. But there's this friction that develops because the SEAL team that comes in, they're kind of flaunting that they don't have to wear a dress code, and it doesn't go well with them. So this is from the book. He says, a handful of the troops from the new unit flaunted an undisciplined appearance. Some had mustaches and goatees with long hair. They wore dirty baseball caps and cut-off T-shirts with mismatched uniforms. Now, some military units on remote, isolated bases might ease their grooming standards in order to fit in with the local populace or with foreign military units they're working with. In some cases, such an appearance might even be required. But here, in close proximity with conventional forces on bases owned and operated by the Army and Marine Corps, this was bound to cause friction. So this new SEAL team comes in, they're flaunting that they don't have to dress like everybody else, and before long, guess what? That SEAL team had to get moved and relocated because the lack of cooperation between the Army and Marines, they said, is as much as gifted as they were, because they were arrogant, they had to get moved elsewhere because they couldn't get along. You will get so much further ahead by not being arrogant. You'll get so much further ahead in life by being disciplined in the little things. And the other thing, and he's telling this story, and he also tells the story, hey, we didn't do that. We didn't have to dress up the same way as the Army and Marine Corps, but we did anyway, just to show support for them. And because we did that, because of how we dressed, showing support for them and our overall, we're on the same mission, it caused them to together to have this synergy to accomplish the mission and work well together that was amazing. It was good for everybody. And so you can apply that same principle to church. When you go to church and you dress like it's Sunday and it's church, you're showing respect for God. You're showing respect for all the other people that came to church and dressed up. You're showing respect for the house of God. You're showing discipline and that you combed your hair and brushed your teeth. You're showing discipline to show up. And you're going to a place of discipline. That's how the military is. You go to a place of discipline, you dress up. Now the SEAL team says in other areas you don't dress up. Why? Because you're on assignment, you're on a mission field, so to speak. You're out there, and so there's a little bit of you have to maybe you need to blend in. So it's like you may not necessarily wear suits to a curbside event. You might dress in such a way that's not intimidating to play with kids to share the love of Jesus. But when you go up to the house of God, you dress up. And if you don't want to, or you fight that, or you defy that, then you need to check your ego. And that's what we're talking about. One example in the scripture of an ego that was unchecked and it led to bad things was the parable that Jesus told about a king who was having a wedding feast, and he invited a bunch of guests. And one of the guys showed up and he didn't have his wedding garment on, which was issued to him. There was no reason not to, except he was being defiant of the king and how he dressed. Matthew 22, 11 through 13. But when the king came in to see the guest, he saw a man there who did not have on a wedding garment. So he said to him, "Friend, how did you come in here without a wedding garment?" And he was speechless. In other words, he didn't have a response because he was copping an attitude. Then the king said to the servants, "Bind him hand and foot, take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There will be weeping and gnashing of teeth." You know, there's a lot of times in life where someone over you is going to tell you to do something you don't want to do. Now, if it's moral, if it's sin, you don't do it. But if it's not a sin and someone that's superior to you in life is giving you instructions, submit and obey. You don't like it? Eat it. Eat your pride. Swallow it. Do it. Check your ego. And if you'll do that, God will exalt you in due time.